Take the Long Way Home by Sean Lansendorfer. The wheezing breath he exhaled was less dragon fire and more air leaking out of a balloon. It was late, so the walk over was a solitary one. Ben got into his car after a long shift, longer than it should have been, but overabundant overtime was the only way he could pay the bills. His was the only one left in the parking lot, sitting under that lonely streetlight. It had low miles and was in good shape, so he kept it far enough away to lower the odds of getting some dents and scratches for whatever reason. It was just nice to keep things nice for as long as you could. His back was as sore as his feet because of the shit shoes he had to wear to ensure he couldn't sue if he slipped or fell on the job. He could moonwalk in the damn things, so much for non-slip. Today hadn't been great, but most days weren't. It was more of the same. Managers fighting over things to blame on him, while never having actually done the job. It was amazing how often there came a change for efficiency's sake that made everything worse. Work was work, and gave him enough money to cover the deductible for the crap insurance they gave him. He didn't have to love it, so tolerating it was good enough. Getting out of bed was the hard part, but he was never the type to avoid responsibilities. He'd be late on occasion and really push the timetables on how long it took to get there, but never missed a day. Having minutes pass like hours was making life take too long. Ben had been uncomfortably hot when outside and freezing in the AC when inside. What was left for him in the night was a balmy evening, though not enough to enjoy. It felt too early to go to bed and too late to do anything with the evening. The bugs were out and had been eating him alive during the short walk to the car, but now he was safe and sound in that faux leather upholstered haven. He put the key in the ignition and let the engine warm up. He had heard rumors that you didn't have to do that these days, but it was a force of habit, waiting for the RPMs to go down. His father had tried to teach him about cars, but he never had the mind for it. Then again, a lot of that old knowledge was probably obsolete now anyway. He could maybe put some air in a tire and only cry a little bit if he ever broke down. The radio came on with the engine. Ben never changed the station, even when it didn't come in too clearly. There was loyalty in that, surely. Mornings were filled with classical pieces by composers he couldn't name, with songs he had never had a chance of recalling. But nights were jazz, and not your everyday run-of-the-mill elevator jazz, the kind of jazz you could feel, the kind people without the ear would hate, the kind you could get lost in if you weren't careful. It was one of the few things Ben could tell people. I guess you just don't get it. His tastes and everything else were painfully pedestrian, and fodder for 1,000 internet essays to talk to death about. Not to say he didn't watch those as well, but it was nice to have something to be bougie about while also wondering who would win in a fight between this fictional so-and-so and the other. He was working on a supposed day off, so he got a different experience than your typical Tuesday. The weekends were fun. The DJs got a little loose and played some stuff you never heard of. Stuff that may as well have come from another dimension. Ben had been working just about every day an hour that was legal, so he got used to the novelty quickly enough. But he'd be damned if he didn't try to keep it special. Ben heard the familiar voice ask for donations, explaining the new goal now that the government had stopped funding the arts. He was generous, but only to what was in front of him. He didn't go looking for old ladies to help cross the street. This was a local station, but felt so apart from his world that it may as well be a signal coming from Mars, if not down the street. All the same, he did feel a bit guilty for not supporting his free entertainment. It wasn't like when you went to the grocery store and that pop-up on the register wanted you to donate what you could on behalf of the billion-dollar heartless corporation that made more than you did in a year in an afternoon. The signal and the transistors were the only connection between the DJ's words and his kindness, the only bridge from one world to the other, that and the music. The car was already sufficiently warmed up, and there was nothing stopping him from going, but all the same he lingered. There was a reluctance to move, as if he was missing something. Ben didn't know what to do about it. Not one to live the high life or go anywhere but home. Joining a book club felt like an out-there move and an outrageous commitment. Action came all the same. He had sat around enough. It was time to go. He put the car into drive and pulled out of the parking lot. He put down his windows for a hint of fresh night air, but rolled them back up as he got onto the street proper. His eyes would get dry, and his hair would blind him with all that whipping around if he went at speed. The weather had kept him guessing as of late, making that jacket seem like a silly thing to bring one moment, and a foolish mistake to forget the next. He didn't crank the AC, but had it at a reasonable 2, strangely combined with his seat warmer to try and soothe his sore back. The voice on the radio introduced the next song. Ben never remembered the names, but never deluded himself into thinking they would come up again aside from this one brief interaction, but enjoyed anything with feeling. The trumpet delivered, but it was a sad moan he felt just a bit too much. The tears in his heart were kept in. It wasn't that he wanted to. The catharsis was something he craved like a drug. It just wasn't right. And you couldn't just give that away for any old trumpet player. His lip quivered and his eyes twinkled with the hint of his pain. But that was all it was to be. There would be no mad wail in the night, begging or bargaining now. She was gone. The one he didn't change for. The one that he betrayed other lovers with every night. There it was again. Better to pivot before you sank. He read all the good books, any he could get his hands on, really, hoping it would make him the man that would bring her back. But the thinking was to do it for yourself. He would breathe for himself on occasion, but was the type to love by loving. Whatever they wanted, whatever they said, whatever box they needed him to fit in. He had to be quick before he got lost again, and think over some of the stuff in those good books. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. That Jesus guy had some one-liners. Someone should write a book about him. Buddhism was more about how suffering came from attachment to the past, to a desire, a mistake, a regret, a future, even a person. Become wiser to escape thinking about what you can't control, and lessen suffering, not to get the outcome you don't have a say in. But it would be nice to get at least a pat on the back for your efforts. Hindu traditions was saying what everyone else was saying. Do what's right because it's the right thing to do. Do good because it's good. Dope. It was easier said than done. Not that he needed religion to keep him from being a barbarian. Kindness was ingrained in him. It was feeling good enough that was the problem. That it wasn't all his fault all the time. It was time to get out of that kind of thinking, or he'd be at it all night. Ben thought through his day instead of his whole damn life. The jokes he should have told, the right thing to say then, the way he ought to have handled that. Then came the flights of fancy. A better way to escape? Not likely, but the least destructive way he could indulge himself. He couldn't help it. What-ifs were what he got lost in more than anything. What if he won some contest he never heard about, and they brought the prize in to surprise him? What if someone with a gun ran in? Would he be the hero? He always moved past that one. It wasn't worth someone getting hurt. But he had been a pretty good pitcher back in the day, and was sure a thermos tossed with gusto would do the job. What if a dinosaur showed up in town? What if he found treasure in his backyard or a secret underground facility? What if he could turn invisible? On second thought, the applications of that power were all bad or perverted, so it was better not to tread down that line of thinking. What if he changed then? What if he were braver? What if he knew now what eluded him then? What if he saw her again? What if they had a karaoke contest right then? He could show off that song he had been practicing in the shower, and everyone would be so impressed. What if his head had exploded? What would their reaction be? It was always more than he deserved and nothing he really wanted, but more comforting than reality. One fantasy always came to mind since he was a boy. Ben made sure both his shoes were tied tight for just that reason. He never kicked them off until he got home, just in case. He had read so many books about folks being spirited away to other worlds or even abducted by aliens. It would be easier to deal with that sort of thing if you had your shoes on. Imagine having one shoe in a mythical land. That would be as good as useless. May as well have nothing at all. And wet socks? Death would be a kinder experience. The distant headlights brought him out of his head for a moment. He had switched off his high beams, but the other driver was not as conscientious. Ben wondered why lights had to be so damn bright. Didn't pirates use eye patches for a night eye? Surely modern man could get used to the lack of depth perception in order to enjoy some hypothetical night vision. The green light up ahead would change by the time he got there, so he let off the gas. There was no one behind him to complain, so he could coast. Save some gas. No need to feather the brakes, just let it go slow. The song changed, and it was an up-tempo tune where people would be trading solos until the cows came home. It was quite the departure from the last number, but felt like a natural transition somehow. Gloom settled into numbness when you've been down so long. You need that heat to understand just how cold it is. Mood was a funny thing like that. A laugh could come on the darkest day, and a smile could be heavy with memory. Though he was rather bummed he hadn't heard the end of that last one. He heard the saxophone go off. What a dream to be able to play like that. It could cry, it could wail, roar, and rave. You could feel the breath, the life of each note. The turn was coming up. It was a more direct route, more lights but a higher speed limit, and less to look at unless you liked Fat Food Lane or seeing if that mattress and carpet shop that had a perpetual going out of business everything must go sale was actually curtained. Ben took the back way, winding roads and tall trees like a cage of shadows on the flanks. It was a great big tar serpent that would take him home. He didn't really know which way was faster, but this one had the right feel for the night. It was fun to think that a deer could just jump out and ruin him. He once heard a turkey went through a windshield and just popped, blood and feathers covering the interior. He was the kind of guy to get sad if he might have hit a chipmunk, and be damn near defeated if he felt the bump. People get hit by cars all the time, but imagine if one the size of a comparative building just came out of nowhere and flattened you. It was troubling how his mind could connect seemingly disparate things together. Ben was a fan of glam rock, the attitude, not the costumes. He heard the guy from T-Rex hit a tree. A bit morbid, but funny to think that some oak has been standing there for 60 years, and we just have to meet it at the wrong moment of that long life to end ours. It didn't even need to go anywhere. His stomach rumbled. He'd go from barely eating to just munching on whatever he could just for something to do. Ben wondered if dinner would be ready. It was late, but they always sat at the table together. It was heads or tails if the meal was delicious or a slapdash miracle on the edge of edible. They'd peel their fruit for dessert after, and that always cleansed the palate. It was a lovely thing to have a big family, but you'd see the decay as the packed summer parties and Thanksgivings dwindled as everyone got their own pools and own tables and splintered away. It was a strange mix of burden and comfort taking care of blood. Ben was a sap and just wanted everyone to be okay, and willing to take the hit if it meant someone else's comfort. Speaking of, he had to stop to pick up a bottle of wine. He had almost forgotten, or maybe tried to. Those late calls when he was almost home were infuriating. It was funny. Stopping by the store felt like such a chore, such an out-of-the-way thing. It shouldn't, though picking something up to eat felt extravagant compared to a home-cooked meal, and more than unreasonable after a long day. But he shouldn't react that way and tried to fight it. But it didn't always work that way. The deer on the outskirts came into the light soon enough for him to slow down without any fuss. They came by like a parade, a straggler stopping to have a look before lopping off. Ben smiled and waved. You could never trust a deer, but there was no harm in being polite. It was nice how they stuck together. You'd hate to see a baby flee in a different direction than its mother, or have the group split up on his account. Ben put his foot on the gas again, but kept it at the speed limit. He never understood the allure of having a sports car. Everyone went the same speed for the most part. What was the use of having a machine that could go 185 when the sign said 50? Ben shook his head. Those punks in their burners or rich boys with their exotic cars would tailgate him, as if he had any control over things. It's called the limit, not the suggestion. They should thank him for saving them a ticket, though he would always change lanes and let them fly past when able. Who was he to tell them how to live? He had no need for speed, but to each their own. The radio cut out in the usual dead zone and left him with some static as a catalyst for his next departure. Ben was still a few miles from the main road, and the only car on this darkened woodland route. Perfect place for an alien saucer to come and scoop him up. At least he had his shoes firmly tied and everything in his car to help him outfox those beings who had the ability to travel through space. Surely his little emergency blanket and Virgen de Guadalupe air freshener would give him a chance. Maybe they wouldn't be interested in him. Few were, so he didn't blame them. But you'd think something as smart as an alien would figure out all there is to know about a cow on the first dissection. How many do you really have to probe to figure out they moo and taste good in burger form? What would be worse, another planet or another time? Did aliens take precedence over ghosts? Or was it a fair fight? Ben wanted to believe. To see anything would be a nice sign that there was something bigger than all this, even if it was just a hairy guy with big feet. That would be a fun purpose. Fated to see something everyone would mock you for. Par for the course or a nice change of pace. Maybe Bigfoot had the right idea. Keep to yourself and let your fame precede you. Leave just enough for them to doubt you exist, but keep some interest. The turn was coming up. It wasn't a question of whether he should get some wine, but what were the chances she was already drinking? Sitting at the table could feel like a hostage situation at times, or an interrogation, but they would eventually retire to the living room and watch TV. That was where jokes and lightness lingered well. Having to sit through a bad piece of television was infinitely better, with a commentary track from his loved ones. Those were the moments he wished lasted forever. He couldn't help but think they did it for him, out of kindness or even pity. Surely they got something out of it and weren't humoring him every night, right? It was a sad thing to feel so unworthy. He pulled into the liquor store and got the same $20 bottle he always got. It was named after a rooster, never did him wrong. He was back in the car, but just sat there a bit with his windows open, listening to the bugs and the odd car driving by off in the distance. The cool air settled with him, but those thoughts always came back sooner or later. Ben was on the road. There was another horn melody on the radio, one that filled you with a nostalgic melancholy, like you were watching an episode of Taxi or something. But that might have been a flute. Not that it mattered much, it was the intent. It was a kind of song that went on too long, but that initial string of notes was all you needed to see it through. It lets you sit with your feelings and for a moment be there with them fully, like old friends. How could something that made him smile once be so sad now? They said to be grateful for what you had, and that good things happened. But it was scary to think good times would never come again. Ben held onto the wheel loosely. It was a neat thought that he could just yank it one way or another, and that would be it. A morbid chuckle for the poor tree that had been sitting there for 80 years, just for some jerk to come plowing into it. There it was, minding its own business, and would be there for another few decades after people stopped spreading flowers for the fellow who spent only a short while there. Wait, had he already thought that tonight? How many times has it come up? Maybe as many times as he drove this same road. How long would he sit in the garage this time? Would he turn the engine off before closing the door? Why wasn't that as scary as taking a chance or actually reaching out for help? A book club would be nice, or someone to talk to. Ben let his muscles relax and his arms slacken. In the cool of the night, instinct whispered of slumber under the stars, with the earth below encompassing a body like a motherly embrace. The feel of the hunt and to be hunted, the need to gather and sate, but only what was needed for the day. It was just another night like any other, and he was happy to have it, but he was still taking the long way home.